James here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting March 16th, 2020. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this week's video reading. I am so happy to have you here. This week I'm working with Lenormand, and this is why. Over the course of the week, I kind of keep my finger on the pulse, so to speak, and I keep track of conversations that I have with people regarding cartomancy and card reading over the course of the week. And I've come to the conclusion that that has now been the way of giving me guidance as to what system to work with. So over the course of the week, I had a number of people reach out to me with Lenormand questions or queries or things about the system that they just wanted to know about, especially those who are moving into working with Lenormand. That always makes me so happy when I get to talk to a person who's just starting out on their card journey. It doesn't matter what the system is, but starting out on their card journey. But this week it just happened to be Lenormand. And so I was feeling led and guided to work with Lenormand for that. That's one reason. And the second reason is a little more sobering. It's because there are a lot of things going on in the world these days. And let's just talk about the elephant in the room, possibly. You know, the biggest conversation is around the coronavirus and everybody doing what they need to do to take care of their own physical well-being. And there are people who are ranging across the spectrum in terms of mindset and attitudes about that. And me being the metaphysician that I am, I come to the conclusion that we just honor all thoughts about it, right? Doesn't matter where you fall on the spectrum, all thoughts about how you choose to react and respond to what's going on is perfectly valid. If it works for you and it's your personal truth, then it's valid, right? But given the fact that this is becoming a major topic of concern, and rightly so, that I wanted to see if there was any possibility that the Lenormand would reflect on that. Somebody was nice enough to ask me over the course of the week if I would be willing to do a card reading on the coronavirus. And when she asked me to do it, I kept it between her and I, because there were so many people talking about it on YouTube. You know, I just figured there was enough being said about it that it didn't matter what my voice brought to the conversation. But that may not necessarily be the case this time, because again, everybody's talking about it and it is a thing, and it is something to observe, keep our eyes on, you know, do what we need to do, become more informed, all those kinds of things. And so the cards may reflect that. So that is the second reason that I wanted to work with Lenormand. Okay, so now, which Lenormand deck, right? And so if you're no stranger to these videos, then you know that my favorite Lenormand deck is the Lilac Dondorf. So I figured if it's not broke, don't fix it. So that will be the particular Lenormand deck I am working with. And as always, I will be leaving information about the deck in the description box below. So now that I've talked about the deck and my reasons for wanting to work with it, let's get to the table and see what the Lenormand, specifically the Lilac Dondorf Lenormand, wants to say about the week ahead. And here we are with the cards on the table, and I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the deck. And as I shuffle the cards, I'm focusing on my usual intention for these weekly general readings. And that is for the information and any insight, as well as possible guidance or advice to come through the cards. That is going to be most helpful and beneficial as we move through the upcoming week. So that is the intention I'm shuffling into the cards. And I usually feel led or guided to stop. So my feeling is coming up. I can feel it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop now. And then we'll cut the deck. Fan the cards out. So now I'm looking for 5 cards in the fan that are getting my attention. Oh, I pulled 2, so 2 and 3, keeping with the order that they came out. We have 4. And I'm seeing this card here for card 5. So those are the 5 cards selected. I'm taking the remainder of the deck up. And I'm going to move that to one side. Now I count back. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's just a check for myself to make sure my counting is right. And now I'm going to lay the cards out in a line from left to right. Okay. All right, so when I work with Lenormand, I usually like to start with the middle card. For me, the middle card always tells us what the central issue is or what the cards are asking us to focus on for the week ahead. And this card is Lilies. Okay, so Lilies is a card that can talk about peace and harmony, tranquility, and calm. So given with what's going on in the world these days and the times that we are living in and the things we are having to deal with, this to me makes perfect sense. So it's about how can we focus on creating harmony, being focused on peace or centered on peace, you know. This card also is about the past. So it could be for some people there's focusing on a past issue that needs to be resolved. I'm seeing that as a possibility here with this. And also too, I'm seeing something that centers on a man because the playing card insert is the King of Spades. And so for me, when I read playing cards, the King of Spades can represent a man. So here we have a man who maybe is older because lilies can represent somebody who's elderly or somebody who's a senior. Given the fact that it's a man, it could be maybe a patriarch of a family. I'm seeing something having to do with an older family member possibly. Could also be somebody who's dealing with something having to do with memory, because for me, Lilies is a card that talks about the past, but also talks about memories, right? Or somebody that we are remembering, because now I'm seeing the idea of a memorial, because Lilies for me makes me think of Easter, and Easter is a time when we remember those who have passed on, right? So it could be remembering someone from the past, that kind of thing. So lilies again could be how can we focus on being calm? How can we be centered on peace? You know, and it's making me think like how can we be peaceful within ourselves given the things that are going on in the world around us? How can we achieve peace at this time, right? And it's making me feel like peace of mind, right? Spades, if I go back to the playing card insert, spades is a suit for me that represents the mind and mental activity. So it's like, how can we maybe even master our thoughts? If I go with the playing card insert, the King of Spades for me represents mastery of our thinking, you know, mental mastery, you know, getting control of our mind and our thoughts, right? So it could be all of that. It's like if we're going to be centered and focused on peace this week, it may have to do with our thinking processes, right? What's running through our heads, what's occupying our headspace this week, right? And again, lilies can also represent something having to do with the elderly. And one of the things that's taking place, and it's the elephant in the room, so I might as well say it, you know, everybody's talking about the coronavirus. Everybody's doing what they can to take care of their physical well-being at this time. And so it's making me feel like the people who are most at risk with the coronavirus are the people who are elderly. So it could just be for the majority of us, there may be a need to focus on the older members in our family or just the elderly at large, right? So those are the things that I see with lilies. But again, Lenormand is always reliant on the cards that are next to it to be read in pairs and combination. So let's do that now because that'll give us more information. So what I usually do is after I look at the center card, I'll read the outer cards, the immediately flanking cards. So here we have clouds, yeah. So clouds, here we have uncertainty, right? And if we go with the idea that this is probably talking about the coronavirus, there's still a lot of uncertainty and confusion, misunderstanding about what's going on, right? So that makes perfect sense, right? So here we have maybe confusion or uncertainty about the elderly. Could even be confusion and uncertainty that breeds doubt and that affects our peace. the clouds is usually the most challenging card in the deck. So, but for me, it usually represents the atmosphere. So, we have an air of confusion, an air of uncertainty, right? And that affects our ability possibly of being calm, being at peace, right? And then the next thing I see two kings here because in the insert for the clouds, we have the king of clubs, right? So here we have something involving two men possibly. And the interesting thing about the dynamic is that the king of spades is looking to the king of clubs and the king of clubs is looking away, right? So there may be something about a power struggle between two men, maybe two men in leadership, and that could be maybe in terms of, if we go with the coronavirus, maybe two men in positions of authority who are looking at the situation differently, like they don't see eye to eye, or they're not having the same vision going forward in terms of maybe how to overcome this. Remember, kings are about power, control, and mastery, right? Getting a handle on the situation, right? So there may be something about that as well, right? But it could also be, just something going on between two men in particular. If we make this about not clouds in terms of confusion and doubt, and lilies in terms of peace and harmony, but just focusing on two men, there may be something going on with two men this week, and it may be a form of disagreement, right? Not being on the same page, right? But my first go-to is that there's confusion and uncertainty, doubt, and that's affecting our ability to be at peace and to be tranquil, and to be calm. All right, so now let's take a look at what's on the other side of lilies. And here we have garden. So garden is all about the public. It's about society at large. It's about the community, right? It's also about social events, public gatherings, public places, social spaces, all those kinds of things, right? So here we have, if we pair the mirroring cards, which is clouds and garden, here we have confusion, doubt, and uncertainty for society, even for the world, right? Because the garden card for me can represent not just society at large, but even the world, right? So here we have confusion, doubt, uncertainty for the world or the community, right? There's public uncertainty, public confusion, things of that nature. And again, that's saying that's going to be affecting the ability to be at peace, right? So that's what I'm seeing with garden. And so now let's take a look at the outer cards, the far outer cards. Starting on the left, we have stars. Okay, so if this is about the coronavirus, and I'm feeling that it is, then the stars for me can represent something that spreads, right? So this is about spreading of the virus, and that's about uncertainty, right? And it's about maybe uncertainty about how it spreads to the elderly or to the people who are more mature, right? Because they seem to be the population, garden, that are most susceptible, right? And so there may be something about how can we minimize that? How can we minimize this spreading, right? So there's that with stars for me. Stars can also be about guidance and direction. So there may be something about guidance and direction that's unclear or uncertain or becomes uncertain, right? Because here we have confusion, and stars is usually about clarity, and they're next to each other. So there may be something about guidance and direction or even clarity that becomes an issue. Now, if I take this out of the arena of the coronavirus, then this could be somebody is not clear on what either their hope or their wish is regarding a situation or a goal that they're trying to achieve. Because here we have hope or a wish is doubtful or becomes uncertain. And why is that? Here we have stars and lilies. Here we have a goal from the past or a past wish or a hope or a wish for somebody who's elderly. Right, so there is that with stars. And so now let's take a look at the card on the opposite end. And here we have mountain. So mountain is a card that represents a challenge, a block, or an obstacle. Right, so this week's reading, I think is really keeping a pulse on what's going on out in the world garden, and is saying there's going to be some sort of block, or challenge, or obstacle. Mountain is not necessarily saying like the challenge being presented is insurmountable. It can be overcome. It probably will just take some time. And as I'm talking, I'm looking at the cards again, and the first thing that I see here, or what jumps out at me in the moment right now, is here we have, remember, social events, public spaces, places where people get together, right? This is the park, right? It's also known as the park. So it made me think of Disney World suspending activities, right? And so there's going to probably be more of that as this progresses, right? There's going to be, here we have what people have been calling social distancing, right? Here we have like being out in public. Being out in public becomes a challenge, right? And so this could be events that are going to be setbacks, delays, things being postponed. That's all mountain energy for me. Mountain represents setbacks, delays, and postponements, right? And so if we go back to the other two cards, it could be saying too, like, it's not clear when that will be resolved, right? Now, with these two cards being at the end of the line, it makes me feel like that's going to be something that's going to continue for a while, right? And I'm going with this as a potential timing device here. The lilies for me can represent winter, and so in particular, Easter. Going with the idea, I think of Easter lilies when I think of the lilies card. So here we have a possibility here that we're not sure where things are going or where things are headed until Easter. So maybe we'll have a better sense then, or that is going to continue after Easter if we go with order of the cards, right? This is the middle, and then we have this at the end. So there may be something about Easter and going forward where things are going to continually be postponed or pushed back or canceled or blocked, those kinds of things. I'm seeing that. And there may be also something having to do with social media. When I see stars in the garden, for me that can represent being online and social media. And so there may be some confusion or uncertainty or doubt about information that's being spread on the internet. And it may come as either a group of people are going to be blocked, right? There may be something about a group of people in particular who are playing a role or a part in either the uncertainty of the doubt. The word that actually came to me is the misinformation. So there may be misinformation about what's going on with the virus, and as a result of that, it may be connected to a group of community, and then somebody's going to be blocked, because here we have internet and blockage. So it could be, again, coming back to the two cards here that have faces on them, there may be something having to do with two men in particular, or two men are in leadership positions of particular groups, communities, or parties. That may lead to this. And I'm talking about the blockage. Right? So now, if somebody was maybe planning an event, then this card would suggest that maybe that event is going to need to be rescheduled, because I'm seeing, again, a setback, a delay, or even a postponement, right? And if that's the case, if things are being shut down or things are being postponed or things are being rescheduled, those kinds of things, coming back to the middle card is like how we may need to find ways to kind of come to peace about that. It may be challenging, mountain, but the cards are suggesting like how can we be focused on peace, right? This card is maybe more about protection of our families, because sometimes the King of Spades connected to the Lilies card is about doing what we need to do to protect our families, right? And so maybe, yes, you could express and feel disappointment or regret for maybe certain events that maybe were scheduled that you were looking forward to, but come back to this. The other thing here on the flip side of that is that we're doing what we can to keep our families safe and protected. And so on that note, I'll go ahead and end this week's Oracle Outlook reading here. This has been James and Mitchell, and I'm signing off, and I want to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading And I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have the best of weeks possible, and take care.